Hello, I'm Sebastian. Welcome to Nine Nar Trees podcast. Today, I will summarize and review the book, Doom, The Politics of Catastrophe, by historian Niall Ferguson examines why societies repeatedly fail to anticipate, absorb, and learn from disasters. Using a wide historical lens, Ferguson treats catastrophe not as a rare interruption, but as a recurring feature of human systems shaped by politics, institutions, and networks. The book connects classic crises such as plagues, fires, earthquakes, and wars with modern shocks like financial crashes and pandemics, asking what turns hazards into mass calamities. A central theme is that the impacts of disaster are seldom evenly distributed, because inequality, governance quality, and information flows determine who is protected and who is exposed. Ferguson also explores how fear, rumor, and official missteps can amplify damage, while competent administration and social trust can limit it. Written for readers interested in history, public policy, and risk, the book argues that catastrophe is rarely purely natural and is often the result of decisions made long before the headline moment. I will give you key takeaways from this book. Firstly, disaster as a political outcome, not just a natural event. A key argument is that catastrophes become truly destructive when political systems fail at preparation, coordination, and recovery. Hazards like disease outbreaks or storms may be unavoidable, but the scale of death and disruption often reflects choices about infrastructure, public health capacity, emergency planning, and communication. Ferguson frames disaster management as a test of state capability. Can institutions act early, gather reliable information, and mobilize resources without paralysis or corruption? He also highlights how incentives shape behavior, as leaders may downplay risk to avoid panic, protect markets, or preserve their reputation, even when transparency would save lives. Another political dimension is the distribution of vulnerability, because land use, housing quality, and access to healthcare are deeply tied to policy. When systems are underfunded or fragmented, response becomes slower and less equitable. The book pushes readers to see catastrophe as a governance problem with historical precedents. Studying past failures and successes becomes a practical tool for evaluating present institutions, identifying weak points, and designing reforms that reduce future losses. Secondly, networks, contagion, and cascading failures. Ferguson emphasizes the role of networks in spreading both harm and recovery. In earlier eras, trade routes and urban density accelerated the transmission of pathogens, while today global supply chains, financial linkages, and digital platforms can turn localized shocks into worldwide crises. The book uses the idea of contagion broadly. Viruses spread biologically, but panic, misinformation, and market collapses spread socially and economically. Modern systems often deliver efficiency at the cost of resilience, with just-in-time logistics and tight coupling between sectors. When one node fails, effects cascade into others, causing shortages, political unrest, and institutional overload. Yet networks are not only threats, they also enable rapid dissemination of best practices, mutual aid, and coordinated scientific work. The difference lies in how networks are governed and whether trust and verification mechanisms exist. By focusing on interconnectedness, the book encourages readers to rethink risk as systemic rather than isolated. Preparedness requires mapping dependencies, building redundancy, and planning for second-order consequences that often cause more lasting damage than the initial shock. Thirdly, information, fear, and the battle to control the narrative. Another central topic is how information environments shape disaster outcomes. In crises, people seek explanations, scapegoats, and signals about what to do next. If official messaging is delayed, contradictory, or politicized, uncertainty grows and rumor fills the gap. Ferguson examines how authorities across history have managed, manipulated, or misunderstood public communication, sometimes suppressing warnings or punishing messengers. Modern media dynamics intensify this challenge. Rapid sharing can spread life-saving guidance, but it can also amplify false claims, deepen polarization, and undermine compliance with public measures. The book draws attention to risk perception because humans often overweight vivid threats and underweight slow-moving dangers. Leaders and institutions must therefore communicate clearly about probabilities, trade-offs, and evolving evidence. Effective crisis communication is not only about broadcasting orders, but about sustaining credibility through consistency and transparency. The topic also includes how post-disaster narratives influence accountability. Whether societies treat catastrophe as fate, incompetence, or malice affects reforms, trust in institutions, and readiness for the next crisis. Fourthly, inequality, social trust, and who pays the price. Ferguson highlights that disasters expose and widen existing inequalities. The ability to avoid risk, evacuate, work remotely, or access quality care is unevenly distributed, and these differences can convert a shared hazard into unequal suffering. The book connects this to social trust. When communities believe institutions are fair and competent, people cooperate more readily, accept temporary sacrifices, and share resources. When trust is low, measures are resisted, enforcement becomes coercive, and social conflict escalates. Historical examples show that catastrophe can destabilize regimes, provoke riots, or accelerate political change, especially when the public perceives elites as insulated from harm. Inequality also shapes recovery, as wealthier groups often rebuild faster and capture relief, while poorer areas face lingering displacement and degraded services. The lesson is that resilience is not merely technical, it is social and moral. Policies that reduce vulnerability before crises, such as robust healthcare, safer housing, and credible safety nets, can lower death tolls and shorten recovery. Disaster planning becomes a mirror of a society's priorities and its willingness to protect the most exposed. Lastly, learning the right lessons and building resilience. The book argues that societies frequently learn the wrong lessons from catastrophe. After a crisis, there is pressure to find simple causes, punish a few individuals, and then return to normal. Yet resilience requires institutional memory, sustained investment, and reforms that survive the political cycle. Ferguson explores why preparedness is chronically undervalued. Voters and leaders reward visible short-term benefits, while prevention often looks like wasted spending until disaster strikes. He also points to the danger of overcorrecting, where measures tailored to the last crisis leave systems vulnerable to different threats. Effective resilience involves scenario planning, stress testing institutions, and maintaining surge capacity in critical sectors. It also demands clear lines of authority, data systems that support early warning, and coordination across jurisdictions. A broader message is humility about complexity, because models can fail and expert consensus can shift as evidence changes. The goal is not perfect prediction but adaptive capacity, the ability to respond rapidly, communicate honestly, and revise strategies in real time. By treating catastrophe as a recurring governance challenge, the book invites readers to prioritize robustness over mere efficiency. In conclusion, this book is best for readers who want a historically grounded way to think about modern risks, policymakers, business leaders, students of history and political economy, and anyone trying to make sense of why some crises spiral while others are contained. It can benefit daily life by sharpening judgment about uncertainty, incentives, and institutional capacity, helping readers evaluate claims during emergencies and understand the trade-offs behind public measures. The emphasis on networks and cascading failures also offers practical insight for organizations and households that depend on complex systems, from supply chains to healthcare. Compared to many disaster or pandemic books that focus narrowly on a single event, Ferguson's approach is comparative and structural, linking multiple types of catastrophes to recurring patterns in governance, information, and inequality. That breadth makes the book useful even when the next crisis looks different from the last one. It is worth buying if you want an argument driven by historical perspective and political analysis rather than a purely technical treatment of risk. The result is a framework for thinking about resilience that travels across time, place, and crisis type. If you would like to support Niall Ferguson, you can buy the book through the Amazon link I've provided in the podcast description. After reading the book, please let me know what you think and share your thoughts. See you around.